Look, I don't care that the Nuggets just beat the Nets and the Raptors during a back-to-back with both games being in overtime. Those two teams are probably going to combine for what, 45, maybe 50 wins at the absolute most. This is not the same Denver Nuggets team. And right now, the way they're constructed, the way they look, the way they're playing, they're not even a contender in the Western Conference to me. On the bright side, Jokic is still awesome, but the amount of responsibility, the amount of effort he has to put in just for them to be competitive against bad Eastern Conference teams is very, very concerning. There's a couple of big issues here. First and foremost, the thing that everybody has pointed out, even Jokic himself, this team cannot shoot the basketball. They cannot make shots. They don't space the floor well. They lost KCP in the offseason, who hasn't even been shooting well in Orlando, but was one of their better floor spacers. They don't have high-level shooters. Jokic is averaging a career high in three-pointers attempted because he has to now, in addition to being the facilitator, the creator, the best rebounder, guard every ball screen every time down the floor, he now also has to be the best floor spacer on the team. And that has not been helped by any of their offseason additions, namely Russell Westbrook, who admittedly Jokic himself wanted to add to the team. He's certainly not helping the floor spacing issue, and the loss of some of the other guys they've lost over the last couple of off seasons certainly is not helping either. They're counting on Christian Brown, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson. They're counting on these guys to be reliable, consistent floor spacers, and they're just not. Their depth and their youth, both of those are significant issues for Denver, and it's not just that they're not spacing the floor, it's just that they're counting on such young guys to play such critical roles for this team. They don't have a lot of proven veteran players on their bench that provide them real actual depth, and one of the guys that does is Russell Westbrook, who, I'll be honest, doesn't even really look like an NBA player for every other game that he plays. And on top of that, the two guys that are supposed to be the foundation around Jokic in terms of the quote-unquote stars of the team, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., these guys are not the same either. I don't know what happened to Jamal Murray, but in the Olympics, he was terrible. He barely played for Team Canada. When he did play, he was bad. He hasn't been good to start this season. And honestly, he wasn't even that good down the stretch last year either. The last time we got really awesome Jamal Murray was during that run to the 2023 title. And since then, he just hasn't been the same guy. He looks slow. He doesn't look nearly as athletic. All of his jump shots are falling short. I don't know exactly what's happening with Jamal Murray, but it's to the point where it's not just a slump at this point. It's so far extended. It's been such a long period of time during multiple events with multiple different teams that I'm officially concerned about what Jamal Murray can provide for this team. And by the way, they just signed him to an extension as well. The other guy is Michael Porter Jr. I'm telling you, if Michael Malone had a real other option to put out there on the wing to play over Michael Porter Jr., I think that he would. He looks lost on defense. He looks disinterested on offense, and he's not making jump shots. It's the only thing that Michael Porter Jr. is supposed to do for this team. Bare minimum, he's supposed to make jumpers. He's supposed to be the floor spacer, and he's not even that. I'm telling you, if Michael Malone had a decent average replacement, if he had Royce O'Neal on the team, he would play Royce O'Neal over Michael Porter Jr. right now. I guarantee it. He's just not playing well. That doesn't mean that him and Jamal Murray can't figure it out. But if those two guys are not going to play at the level that they did on their way to the title in 2023, they have no chance of actually going on a championship run. Aaron Gordon's actually been decent. He's made a couple of threes and been pretty surprising from a scoring perspective. But other than that, they just don't have good options. And quite frankly, other than Jokic, this is just not a well-constructed team. You've got Dario Saric coming off the bench, I guess. You've got all those young guys that I mentioned earlier, but the Nuggets have made a conscious effort to rely more on these younger players over the last couple of off seasons. They lose Bruce Brown 2 off seasons ago. They lose KCP this past off season because they're confident that the guys that they've been developing in the background, Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, Christian Brown, are going to be able to step up into those roles. And maybe in the long term, they'll be right. But right now, Jokic is still arguably the best player in the entire league, and they're putting a team around him that, as of right now, is simply not championship caliber. Now, they couldn't have expected MPJ and Jamal Murray to play this poorly, and I'm sure at some point they'll turn it around and be much better. But right now, the night-to-night responsibility that is on Nikola Jokic to try and get this team to be competitive, even against bad teams, is extremely concerning. This has always been an issue the entire time that he's been really, really great in Denver, is all the on-off numbers. Every single time you watch a broadcast of the Nuggets, especially a national TV broadcast, they're talking about the on-off numbers for Jokic and how when he comes off the floor, they're so much worse than when he's on. And by the way, that was the case when they won the title in 2023, and a lot of that speaks to just how good Jokic is and how much of a difference he makes for them and how much they rely on him, especially for offensive creation. But during that run of the title, Jamal Murray was a real legitimate threat in those dribble handoffs. That two-man game between him and Jokic was so difficult to stop. He would hit pull-up threes. He would get to the mid-range. His float game was there. He would get all the way to the rim. He never does any of that stuff anymore. He comes off the dribble handoff, doesn't really create any advantage, and then short arms a jumper that barely hits the bottom of the rim. Like, it is so crazy how much worse he is. And yes, they won each of these games, and that's fantastic for them. But in the long term, there's, I don't know, 5-6 teams in the West that I would pick over Denver right now, which is crazy to say because I love Jokic. He's incredible. It just speaks to how poorly constructed the rest of the roster is that I'm even saying that. And I understand why Denver went the route that they did with the roster construction, because whether it be Jeff Green, whether it be Bruce Brown, whether it be KCP, these guys were going to cost money to retain. And in the second apron era, with the way that the payroll was already structured there in Denver with Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, and Jokic, it was going to be difficult to continue to pay, KCP $30 million a year. Like, that was just going to be difficult for them to justify, especially when they've been developing some of these younger guys in the background, like Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, and Christian Brown. And all that sounds great on paper until you actually have to play the games and you're counting on guys that are in their first, second, third year in the league that can't shoot around arguably the best player in the entire league. And it's not like it was impossible for them to bring back KCP. It's not like it was impossible for them to bring back Bruce Brown. They just chose not to. They thought that they could put themselves in a better position from a payroll perspective by not bringing those guys back. There's no rule that said they couldn't have brought them back. You look at the Celtics roster, all they do is re-sign all their guys. They were worried about the second apron, and all that makes total sense. But these are the consequences of that. They made a bet on their young guys being good enough to replace KCP, being good enough to replace Bruce Brown, and they just aren't. And what might end up happening is, they might save some money by not having KCP, not having Bruce Brown, not giving those guys big contracts, but now they might end up having to use draft capital at the deadline to bring in some random wing that's still going to make $15 million a year, or whatever the case may be. Maybe they'll try and bring back Jeremy Grant, and there's $30 million right there, but they're still going to end up having to use stuff to create a usable team, because right now they are a non-competitive basketball team against the best teams in the conference. They're barely competing against the worst teams in the East right now. Now, thankfully for them, they have the ultimate cheat code in the league, and that is Nikola Jokic. For now, they're still going to be able to tread water while these other guys figure it out. But in the long term, I really don't know what the options are here. They gave Jamal Murray the extension. He doesn't even look like an all-star caliber player to me. Like, there's so many good guards. There's so many players that you can allow create for you, and he's just not been one of those guys. I guess there's a potential move here where you can move Michael Porter Jr. possibly and shift some things around, but I don't really know who's getting excited about a guy that his only job is to shoot, and all of a sudden he can't shoot. I don't know who's getting excited about that. I truly don't know what the long-term plan is there in Denver. I'm sure near the deadline they'll try and add a wing. I'm sure they'll try and convince themselves by the end of the season that as long as they have Jokic, they have a chance. But this team looks a lot more like those teams in 2021, 2022 when Jamal Murray was hurt, where it was like, Campazzo was out there and it was Jokic trying to basically drag what would be a 35-30 win team without him, try to drag them through the postseason. This team looks a lot more like that team did than whatever they had in 2023 when they went on and won the title. And that is, if I was a Nuggets fan, I would be incredibly, incredibly concerned. It's still a great team with Jokic there, but if at any point his play slips because he's having to do so much, or if they just never get positive regression from a shooting perspective from Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., they're in a ton of trouble.